This is a PokePress special report. Hi, I'm Stephen Reich at the PokePress PIRN Studios in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm on the phone with Alex Nackman, who wrote both of the versions of the ending song from the Victini movies and performed one of them, Follow Your Star. Specifically, he performs the Ideals mix that was used at the end of Pokemon the movie White-Victini and Zekrom, which premiered in theaters. So, Alex, first of all, where are you from, and how'd you get into doing music?
I'm from New York. Well, first, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Steve. I grew up just north of New York City in Sleepy Hollow, which is where the legend took place, if you're wondering. So, kind of a spooky, old New York kind of colonial village. And I live in Brooklyn now, and I've been a New Yorker my whole life. So, I got into music pretty young. I was playing the violin at sort of youth orchestras when I was a kid, and it just kind of blossomed into trying to cover Nirvana and Green Day. And the violin kind of fell slightly by the wayside, and guitar sort of took over, and I've been playing guitar since I was 12, so it's been a while, and actually the violin has sort of made a reemergence of sorts in the last couple of years on some recordings as well, which has been fun. So, yeah.
All right. So how did you end up getting to do these two versions of this song?
Well, I had been working with John Leffler for a while. He's been working on Pokemon projects for a really long time. I want to say a decade, maybe even
Since the beginning.
Since the beginning, yeah. John Leffler in New York, he's a great songwriter, and he's become a close friend at this point. We had been working together on a few things, and he got me involved in it and was a writer on the versions as well, and brought in his other writing partner, David Wolfert, who's also another writer and who's done a ton of Pokemon stuff over the last decade with John. So the two of them basically brought me in and kind of got me introduced to the world of the show and the movies and the DVDs and just sort of what kinds of different sounds they go for and different moods they go for, and that's kind of how it sort of happened. So really, it was John and David. I hadn't had too much experience with Pokemon and even cartoons in general. I just hadn't done a whole lot of work in that area, though I had been writing a lot with TV and film.
And did they ask you to do two versions from the outset, or is that something that evolved within the process?
It was mentioned that two versions were needed. It was something we weren't sure whether how much involvement I was going to have on both. We wanted there to be a certain consistency through both of them. We didn't want to create two completely separate songs that had two completely different identities. And I don't even think that the producers on the show were looking for that. I think they wanted something that had a continuity to it. So we were sort of talking about two versions born out of one from the get-go. We just weren't quite sure how we were going to tackle both. So,
what are some of the similarities and differences between the two versions? Now, the other version has a female performer, but what else is there to compare and contrast there?
Well, as we were talking about slightly earlier, the ideals versus truth, I think, was a really kind of powerful message we were trying to work on, especially for a younger audience, and a way to convey those two pretty mature ideas. I think in the ideals version, we were trying to kind of be a bit more dreamlike, more on the poetic side, and on the truth side, I felt we were trying to be a bit more real, a bit more literal. So I think we were trying to combine different kinds of songwriting strategies. In any song you listen to, there's always going to be things that are very literal and very, matter of fact, and things that are very sort of poetic and metaphorical and figurative. And, we wanted to kind of maintain those songwriting constructions in both songs, but also create them in different ways so that the ideals version became kind of the thinking version, if you will, and the truth version became the more of the sort of sidewalk kind of hard-nosed feel, if that makes any sense.
Was one of them more difficult or took longer to write than the other?
They both kind of came at a similar time. I think the truth one came slightly later, but they both have their challenges because when you're writing for any kind of different audience than you're used to, and John and David certainly have had experience with with Pokemon and with younger audience in general, so they were able to help me a bit. I had less experience with it, and I had my own little kinds of growing pains, I think, in this area, where I had been so used to writing songs either for myself or for just an older audience of people that I knew, might be able to get a complicated reference or some complicated construction or some sort of poetry. I was trying to be, poetic of some kind, either failing or not. And so I really had to kind of take a different step on both of these tunes, and there were some challenges. I think the first go around, we had a really nice melody that we were all really happy with, but lyrically, I think John and David both felt like it was too complicated, and it was just hard to grasp. And that's a challenge for me to sort of go back and, try and not fall into the normal ways of songwriting that I've developed, I think, over the last 10 years of writing music not for kids. And I don't write complicated music. It's just I write knowing who generally listens to the things I write and, what I'm able to get away with, I guess, in terms of metaphors and such. So,
is there any part of either of the versions that you'd really like to call out?
I guess I can really say more about the one that I sung on just because I spent so much time in the studio with it, and the second version I was writing it, and then once it was written, Catherine, who in New York, kind of took over from there. But I think in just the first stanza, or the first verse, I should say, we were really trying to give it a dreamlike feel, as I was saying earlier, and I was trying to evoke some of what I was seeing in the picture, but not exactly just create some dialogue that just goes along with the picture. That's not quite a song. So we had to kind of give this sort of flying, kind of ethereal feeling, and I think that's sort of what I was trying to evoke, and making the right choices. And I mean, the first verse, I think, is really something that we were all happy with, and in terms of trying to, I guess, capture what's on screen, but also make the younger audience think a bit, to be good people, to be a good friend, and basically the ideals that Pokemon was trying to evoke. So.
All right, and then you released an album earlier this year, back in January, called This Revolution. Why don't you pick out a couple songs from that and tell us about them?
Sure. Let me go back and think about the track list. Yeah, one song I've really been, over the last several years, I've always written songs that, or I should say I've released albums that always have city names, but NY was a song on the new album, or the current album, that it was really the first song about New York that I've ever written, and it's strange because I've been here for so long, and I've lived in New York my whole life, so to not have a song about it seems strange. I would think it would be the first thing I'd write, but it really wasn't. So NY was that first song about my home, which was kind of a neat thing to think about a little harder than I had before. And this New York is a great city, and I love it. I think at times it can really get people down, unfortunately. It's just kind of is a yin and yang kind of city, kind of a intermingling black and white kind of place where there's just a lot of contradictions. And I think I was sort of asking New York to, not let me go so easily. I think I had some contemplations of moving and just trying something new, trying something calmer, trying something that was just less taxing. And it's one of those cities that you love it, but you love to hate it sometimes too. So it's just an ongoing kind of marriage, I think, for New Yorkers. So.
All right. Any other tracks?
I think the other one that had been really getting some nice feedback, which I appreciated, was the last track, "Stay Awake," which the whole album is pretty. It's heavier than my previous releases. It just has sort of a different energy, and it's a little bit more electronic. It's a little bit just the guitars are beefed up, and then there's this last track that's totally stripped down and totally acoustic and really organic, and I recorded it in one take, and it just was a complete departure from everything else, and it closes the entire album, and it kind of brought me back to where I began. I started as an acoustic artist. I started playing in coffee shops. I started playing, with no one else there, and I think in that way, the album has that revolving kind of vibe. It's that revolution, I think. It's a revolution of sound. It's a revolution of where I've tried to put myself, and in the end, things do come back to where you began, whether you realize it or not. You're always going back to where you started. Your values, your ideals, your family, things that you've learned when you were a kid are going to be there when you're 80 years old, and it makes it who you are. And I think, the album does that sonically as well as during the story that it tries to tell. So.
All right. So now, of course, this revolution, you can find that on iTunes. Just search for you on there. And if people want to find your website or on any of the social media services, where are you listed as there?
Really, my official website is just alexnackman.com, and everything is really right there. Tried to make it super user-friendly, so all the appropriate social media links are just right there on the front page, and it'll connect you everywhere. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Alex. It's been great having you on and getting some insight into some of the songs that are in the latest movies.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it. It's really been a pleasure, and thank you for having me.
This has been Stephen Reich from the Pokepress PIRN Studios in Madison, Wisconsin, on the phone with Alex Nackman, who wrote and performed one of the versions of the ending song from the Pokemon Victini movies, Follow Your Star. This has been a Pokepress Special Report.